124 Spider. I've owned it now for about 12 months, and I want to take a bit of time today just to tell you guys how I found it over this time. Talk about some of the things that I like, some of the things that I don't like, some of the sort of the flaws that this car has that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on if you were just doing a test drive. And we'll talk a little bit about some of its competitors, some of the things you might buy instead. When I bought this car, I was looking to replace a 2006 Audi TT 3.2 Quattro that I had. And I was looking to replace it because I wanted something that was just a little bit more fun. I wanted a convertible again. I wanted a daily drive that wasn't just a daily drive, you know. I wanted something that I would start up in the morning and I would look forward to my commute, which the TT just didn't give me. In the past, I've mostly had convertibles. You know, I've had a few MX-5s, Porsche Boxster, and I've got a TVR Chimera, which is like my sort of my fun car, my weekend car. So I was looking for something that would complement them, but still be sort of sensible enough, something that would still give me decent enough fuel economy that I wouldn't worry too much about parking in a car park and things like that. The time from the point where I thought I wanted an Abarth to me actually buying one was about 48 hours, which is an incredibly short amount of time for me to actually commit to buying a car. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I basically forgot it existed. And I was looking at my TT one Friday evening, and my thought process was basically, I want an MX-5 again, but I don't want an MX-5. And that was literally what I thought. And then almost straight away my brain went, actually, that exists now. There is an MX-5 that's not an MX-5. The next morning I went out and I went down to my local Fiat and Abarth dealer with the hope of getting some brochures, maybe sitting in one, having a sort of a play, see what it feels like, and then possibly arranging a test drive for maybe the next weekend, something like that. So I went down, and the dealer was actually in the middle of a refurbishment. So although they were open, they didn't have any demonstrators of even the standard Fiat 124s. But the guy went into the back and got me some brochures, which I took home and had a look through. Did lots of research online. I'm quite involved with the MX-5 community, so I know quite a lot about the Mark IV MX-5, and I knew this was basically exactly what that was under the covers. Fiat took the MX-5, fettled with a few things, made it a slightly softer, probably slightly less hardcore sports car, and then Abarth took it from Fiat, took it way back to what Mazda had done with it originally, took it even further still, and made it that little bit more hardcore, that little bit more fun, that little bit more raw. So I was pretty confident at that point that it was exactly what I was looking for. It was the MX-5 that wasn't an MX-5. Don't really like new cars, don't really like the idea of buying something and then losing 20 or 30% of its value in the first 6 or 12 months. So I had a look at what was available, and there was an ex-demonstrator at a relatively local dealer, which looked like it was exactly what I was after. So the next day I went through, I took my dad just to make sure I didn't do anything too stupid. Went through and had a look at this car. Looked absolutely immaculate, had less than 300 miles on the clock, 6 months old. Took it out for a test drive, and pretty much straight away came to the conclusion that yeah, this is exactly the sort of thing that I'm after. Dealer was great, you know, it was an Abarth dealer, but got a proper test drive on it on a reasonable selection of roads. Got a couple of overtakes done on some cars as well, which was a great chance to see what the real world performance of the car was like. And pretty much straight away, like I say, I knew exactly that this was what I wanted. So did a few negotiations with the trade-in for the TT. Got a price which I was reasonably happy with. I hadn't owned the TT that long, but I'd bought it from a private seller. So although I lost a bit of money on it, it wasn't too bad, and just for the general convenience of the simple transaction, it was worth it. The salesman said, so when do you want to pick the car up? And being a sort of typical car guy, I think everybody has the same answer to that, and it's basically like, well, now please. So the salesman had a day off coming up, and what he said was, well, I can get it ready for you tomorrow if that works. And of course I'm like, yeah, tomorrow's great. So finished work at 5 o'clock the next day, went through, it's about a 45-minute drive to the dealer, dropped off the TT, said my goodbyes, picked this up and drove it home, and pretty much confirmed that yeah, it was indeed exactly what I wanted from a car. So like I say, that's now 12 months that I've owned it, and I've learnt a few things in that time. A few things that you don't necessarily pick up on a test drive. And having just, spent a bit more time with it, you get to know the car more, you get to know what it's capable of. And what I would say is that this is a spectacularly good sports car. As you would probably expect, with it basically being an MX-5, but it's an MX-5 with a little bit more power. Very, very drivable. You can take this car up to the limit, you can have an awful lot of fun with it in a way that you probably couldn't in almost any other sports car these days. And there's one very simple reason for that, and it's weight. And this is a car that weighs about 1,060 kilograms, and if you compare that to something like a modern day M3 or modern day M4, which are about 1,600, 1,700 kilograms, this is an incredibly light car. 1.4 litre turbocharged engine puts out in the general region of 170 brake horsepower, which means you've got about 170 horsepower per tonne. And to let you guys into a little secret, all you guys that love horsepower figures, on the public road in the UK, once you get to about 170, 180 horsepower per metric tonne, per 1,000 kilos, no more power makes you go faster. We're driving on this road here, it's quite a twisty back road, probably been on it for 3 or 4 minutes. Not once have I went above about 80% throttle. It's just not possible to use any more power on the public road whilst remaining safe, whilst remaining legal. It's just not possible. And if you drive a car like this well, and I'm not Lewis Hamilton, but I can probably get the most out of most cars, what I would say is that nothing will pull away from you. I can get behind Porsches, BMW M-cars, Ferraris, and unless it's a drag race from a standing start, none of them will pull away. In fact, they'll hold you up. Weight is, of course, the biggest enemy of a sports car. If your car is heavy, it impacts how well it can accelerate, how well it can brake, how well it can handle. And you can keep throwing more and more power at a car, and you can give it bigger brakes, you can give it better suspension, wider tyres. And all of these things go some way to mitigate the impact that the extra weight has. But you can never really get rid of it. The basic physics of momentum and inertia just don't go away. And what you end up doing, as you add more grip, for example, you just make the car more capable but less fun, because you can never take it near the limit, because you end up with a situation where you've got 400 brake horsepower, tyres that are this wide, and so many electronics that on the public road, where in the UK, we've got a maximum speed limit on anything that's not a motorway or like an interstate of 60 miles an hour. So you're never going to go faster than that. Not legally, officer, of course. So you're very limited to how fast you can actually go. So what you really want is something which is fun at safe and legal speeds. And anybody that I know who owns one of these sort of modern day performance cars, the ones that are weighing 1.5, 1.6 tons, they tend not to own them for very long. They'll have them for at most a year or two, and then they'll sell them. And the conclusion I would come to with that is that they're just not terribly interesting cars to own or drive. They're basically boring. Whereas something like this, we can come up to a corner and we can absolutely thrash it about. We can actually get the rear kicking out a little bit under braking there, and we're doing that all at about 40 miles an hour. Roads are damp today, we can really push up to the limit for the first time on this drive. We're hitting full throttle there. And it's so much fun. It's fun that you just couldn't have in a car that was bigger or wider. So let's talk about some of the extras that this car does have and the sort of equipment levels that you can expect. It's actually pretty well equipped, especially for a car that, like I say, weighs only just over 1,000 kilos. You've got climate control, air conditioning, cruise control, LED adaptive headlights, parking sensors at the rear, satellite navigation. You've got a nice sort of touchscreen here as well. All the sort of MP3 and Bluetooth connectivity that you would expect on a modern car. So while we're driving through town here, let's talk about some of the things in this car which aren't so good. The biggest gripe I would have, and this is something that I did pick up on the test drive, and I kind of thought I would get used to it, and to some extent I have, but it's never really gone away, and I don't really know how Abarth or Fiat have managed to do this, but they've managed to build a car with a speedometer which is really hard to read. It goes up in 20 mile an hour increments, which is probably fine, but then it's got like really, really fine like ticks throughout the rest of the scale. And it just makes it really hard to see what speed you're actually doing if you're not doing 20, 40, 60 or 80 miles an hour. In terms of things that I don't like, I don't think you could ever drive a car like this, any modern sports car made from about 2008 onwards, and not complain at least a little bit about steering feel. Led to believe that this is always down to the electric power steering systems that they fit to cars now to try and help reduce the amount of auxiliary things the engine's doing, and therefore make the engine more efficient and make it produce fewer emissions. Problem with any car with electric power steering is it just doesn't really have the same sort of feel that you would have from a more traditional hydraulic system. And while I would say without doubt this is the best electric power steering system I've ever driven, and I've driven, these systems in Fords, in BMWs, and in various other sort of performance cars, and this is by far the best one. But compared to something like my TVR or the older MX-5s, it just isn't quite as communicative. It's not bad, and I think for the majority of people you probably wouldn't even notice what I'm saying, but for me, there's definitely something that's lacking there. We've definitely passed the golden age in steering feel, which I suppose starts to lead quite nicely onto some of the things you might buy instead of this car. So if you had, let's say, 30 to 60,000 pounds to spend on a car, you wanted something which was a genuine sports car, something that was lightweight, fun to drive, something that revolved around the driver in a way that something like a modern day Porsche 911 or Boxster or BMW M-car just doesn't do, you really don't have very many options. The obvious alternative would be the Mazda MX-5, and to be honest, I can't really give you a good reason why you wouldn't buy that. If you wanted to spend a little bit more money, something like the Alfa Romeo 4C or the new Renault Alpine, something like that, which is, again, so driver focused, it would be a very, very good alternative to this car. But let me give you a few reasons why I would choose the Abarth over either of them. The first one is price. The likes of the Renault and the Alfa are a good bit more expensive than this, and they're probably a little bit less practical as well. This is a car that you could quite genuinely use every day, and you would never feel that you were in something which was so immersive and involved that it would sort of compromise the day-to-day usability, which I think in the likes of the Alfa, which doesn't come with power steering, I think you would probably start to feel that a little bit. The main reason that I chose this over the MX-5 is I'm just not a massive fan of how the new MX-5 looks. But I also want something which is a little bit different, and preferably something that was felt a little bit more special. You see quite a lot of MX-5s on the road. I think in the entire time that I've owned this, or indeed since this car's been out, I think I've seen 2 Abarths and 1 standard Fiat 124. You really don't see many of them, and that just makes it feel a little bit more special. All round, the drive is just so immersive, and I don't really know for sure how much that would really be replicated in the likes of the MX-5, because so much of it comes from the exhaust, which is again so special on this car. I was at a car show about 18 months ago, actually no, probably 6 months ago, probably about 80 to 100 miles away from where I live, and I didn't go in the Abarth. I went with my dad in my dad's car, and I was standing at one of the food vans, one of the catering trucks, to get some lunch, and the guy in front of us in the queue turns around and says, "Do you have the Abarth?" And I kind of just assumed at first that it was somebody who knew my dad and was part of the club that we'd gone to the show with, and said to the guy, "Yeah, I do." And he says, "Do you park at the train station where I park every morning?" And like, yeah, he's like, "Sounds incredible, absolutely lovely car." And this is a guy that recognised the car, obviously every day, liked it, liked the noise it made, liked how it looked, and to the extent that he then recognised me. And then I've never spoken to this guy before ever in my life, wouldn't be able to pick him out from a crowd, and speaks to me at a car show, that far away, as a result of it, and that's just something that, again, I don't think I would ever get if I owned something like an M-car or even the standard MX-5s. If you're thinking about buying an Abarth, let's talk a little bit more about some of the exact features that it's got. So it's got a 6-speed manual gearbox. It actually comes out the previous generation, the Mark III Mazda MX-5, and apparently they use that gearbox because it's better at handling the additional power that this car creates. It's an interesting thing to note as well, because the Mark IV MX-5 gearbox is getting a bit of a reputation for not being that reliable, especially on track. There's a few people who race them who have said they've had issues with just gears failing in them. So it's probably not as strong a gearbox if you are thrashing it about as the previous generation ones are. And these gearboxes do have a reputation now, the Mark III ones, of being absolutely rock solid and bulletproof. Being an MX-5 gearbox, it's got a spectacularly short throw. It feels really, really precise. It's a very, very fast gearbox. You know, it encourages you to change gear. Probably one of the best gearboxes ever made, ever in the world, in any car, is in the Mazda MX-5. So the throttle response is absolutely great. The steering's nice and sharp, very, very precise. Feedback could be a little bit better, but overall it's pretty good. The brakes are pretty incredible as well. It's helped by the fact that it's such a light car, but it's got Brembo brakes on the front, and pedal feels pretty good. It's not as solid as it is in some cars, but to be honest, you know, in a car you're using every day, you probably don't want an absolutely rock hard pedal. It's definitely firmer than most other cars I've driven. It's firmer than anything I've had in a BMW or especially Porsche. Porsche brake pedals are typically not that great, and this is a really nice feel to it. So I said earlier on, as well as talking about some of the alternatives that there are to this car, to sort of say why I would recommend it and the sort of person I would recommend it to, and also why to a lot of people I wouldn't recommend this car. And the reality is that an awful lot of people these days don't really like outright sports cars anymore. You know, they want all the gadgets, they want cars that can park themselves and can drive themselves. They don't want a car that they can genuinely connect with and have fun with. And you know, you can tell that so easily, because if you look at almost any new car now, have a look at the BMW website and look at their new M-cars, and see how easy it is to find out how much horsepower they create, what their top speed is, what their acceleration is. But you will find virtually no message anywhere, certainly not in any headline print, about how heavy the car is. You know, you'll have to look at, you know, the proper, like, outright specifications of it. And the funny thing is, they'll talk about some weight-saving things that they do, and they'll brag about having like a carbon fiber roof or oil sump or whatever. You know, and they're bragging about things that are knocking a few kilograms off a car which weighs absolutely loads. The same goes for the size. You know, these are cars that are absolutely massive, and to go from something like a BMW M3 into something like this, it will feel absolutely tiny by comparison. And for some people, that's not what they're going to want from a car. They want something which feels bigger. The people who I think would enjoy this car are genuine drivers, you know, genuine enthusiasts of sports cars. You know, people who want to connect with the car, who want to have proper fun at relatively safe and relatively legal speeds. You know, if you're the sort of person who looks at the more raw sports cars that we've had in the past, from the 70s, 80s, even going into the 90s, and you look at things like that and you just want a modern day equivalent. If you look at the likes of, you know, the TVR I've got, and you think, I want that, but maybe something a little bit less hardcore, something which I could use a bit more practically on a day-to-day basis. If that's the sort of thing you want, then I think this is an absolutely brilliant car for you. If you're looking at the Mazda MX-5 and you just want something which is a little bit more interesting, again, I think this would be pretty much perfect. The MX-5 is the best-selling sports car of all time. So if the Abarth is an even better version of that, surely it should be selling even better still, and you would see more than one or two a year. And I think the answer to that is that they're basically too expensive. It's very, very difficult to justify spending £33,000 on a brand new one of these. You know, I bought mine as an ex-demonstrator, like I say, and the dealer lost probably 20 to 30% of the price of the car in the 300 miles it had done on it. It's very, very difficult to justify spending £30,000 on a car like this, when for the same sort of money you could buy a 2 or 3 year old Porsche Boxster, which on paper is a much better car. But the reality is that you can't judge a car like this based on how it is on paper. And there are so many cars that will give you more horsepower, faster 0 to 60 time, that will lap the Nürburgring in a faster time. But you're not buying a car like this because of how it is on paper, you're buying it because of how it is on tarmac, which ultimately is what matters. There's a tiny little bit of turbo lag, but to be honest, I don't really find that a problem. You know, even if you're just driving about town, it's not really that noticeable. It doesn't really detract from the experience at all. But it is something that you're aware that it's there. Seats are great, they're really supportive, very, very comfortable even on a longer drive, no back problems. Gearbox is phenomenal, the way the power is delivered is great. Brakes are absolutely superb. Like I say, the factory tyre pressure is the 29 psi that they recommend. I don't think is what's best. I think you're better to drop the fronts down a little bit. I think the car feels a lot better for having that. There is one thing which I absolutely hate about this car, and it is even worse than the speedometer in terms of being completely unforgivable, and I cannot understand, I can't begin to comprehend how Abarth could think that this was okay. And that is, when you brake hard, which you're going to do because it's a sports car, you're going to brake hard, the hazard warning lights come on. It's like, oh my god, he's going to crash. No, I'm just braking hard because it's a sports car. That's what you do. And it doesn't do it that often, but it does it enough, especially when, like, they're, you know, braking to go from a 60 mph speed limit into a 40 mph limit. And it's not necessarily just the pressure you apply on the pedal as well. I think it's the time between you coming off the accelerator and going onto the brake. And, you know, what I find is if I'm on a quick drive, it maybe does it 2 or 3 times every 100 miles. But it's enough of an issue, and it's almost a bit of an embarrassment as well, that, you know, I wish it didn't do it. You can apparently have it disabled. Apparently the dealer can do it in the software options on their computer. I asked about this when I took the car for its first service, and the guy said, yeah, we can do that, but it will invalidate your warranty. To which I'm kind of thinking, yeah, but how can it possibly invalidate the warranty? It's a software setting. That's all it is, changing a true to a false somewhere. But apparently it does. And you know, when you pay a premium for a relatively new car, the last thing you want to do is lose the warranty you have on it. So there goes switching that off. As far as fuel economy goes, this is actually a very economical car. Even when you drive it hard, you're still going to get sort of mid-20 miles to the gallon. If you drive it sensibly, you know, if you're on a motorway or an interstate, something like that, you can easily get high 40s, I would say, out of it, possibly even into 50s. The highest I've ever had is probably about 52, 53 miles per gallon, and that was mostly motorway with a little bit of city centre at the end. But on the sort of drive we've done today, you're probably going to get maybe 33, 34 miles per gallon, which is pretty good. You know, there's not many cars that could perform as well as this does, and then gets that sort of fuel economy while doing it. So here we are, guys, my Abarth 124 Spider after 12 months. Thanks for watching. Hope you found that video useful. If you have, please like, please comment, and please subscribe. Hopefully over the next few months we're going to have plenty more videos coming. More with the Abarth. We're going to get the TVR out as well. Also, I know some of you will be a little bit upset about some of the things that I said about BMW, especially the M-cars. And what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and get some of those cars in some future videos as well. We'll talk about some of the strengths that they have and why you might actually choose to buy something like an M4 or an M3 instead of a car like the Abarth.